Greetings, everybody, and welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. My name is Jason, and joining me today are Ron Cecil and Daniel Penner. Hello, gentlemen.
Everybody.
Hey, what's up?
Now, Ron and Daniel are both friends of mine from the real world, but they also have a podcast of their own. So I think we can start the conversation there. Go ahead and tell us about what your show is and where they can find it, what's about, and how it happened.
Yeah, our show is called Cutting for Sign. You've actually been a guest on there. So if you've not heard those episodes, Safest Family on the Block, go listen to those. It is Cutting for Sign is an archaic phrase meaning to look at the clues left behind by the thing one is hunting, such as a footprint or a broken twig or a bent blade of grass or a small drop of blood. And we use that as a metaphor for ourselves, for life, and developing into a better version of who we are and who we want to be and unlocking our potential.
Tracking that animal of the animal we're tracking is the future into the present better experience and of life. It's ourself that we're tracking. Yeah. And it seems to be working really well. That idea, people are connecting with it. It's actually grown into a little bit of a community.
Yeah, it really has. If you want to find our episodes, you can go to any podcast platform and look for Cutting for Sign. It'll pop up. We also have a limited number of full episodes up on YouTube under the same name.
Outstanding. And the basic theme of that show is the thing you're hunting is the person you want to become or the person you have yet to become.
Correct.
That, That's yourself right. In the fullest facet you can be.
Yeah, and it's just a loose it's a relatively loose framework for us to have excellent, what we would say would be meaningful conversations with people. So, what we discovered was really cool is at first it was like, yeah, this is me and Ron tracking ourselves in life, and let's talk to other people about how they've done that. How have you lived a meaningful life? How have you discovered things that happen and then used them or recognized them as breadcrumbs or footstones across the path, but what happened is we started to bring on people who we admire and we're curious about and maybe who we want to be like. And then what would happen was we actually ended up, the conversations that we would have would be cutting for sign in our own life. They would become meaningful. Then we would make changes in our life. It was an unexpected unexpected rhythm there.
Calls to mind a lot. If you look at the advice from highly successful people and you kind of collate that, one of the most commonly repeating pieces of advice or habits from all of those folks is rebiographies.
Yeah.
Because so you see the story of people who were successful enough that people later wrote biographies. Yeah. And that seems like something you're doing now by getting the biographies in progress of people who are edging closer to the human beings that you would like to become.
Yeah, or you have the anti one where you have someone like who is the opposite. Like we had you on twice, so like everything you say, just people
exactly
know the opposite of that.
Yeah. My purpose in life is to serve as a warning to others.
Here be dragons.
Yeah. It does put me in mind of a forgettable role-playing game from the 90s called In Nomine, which nobody needs to remember that, but there was this thing in it about destiny and fate, where you're born and there's not much you can do about that. And after that, for our whole life, there's a series of decisions, opportunities, missed opportunities, successes, failures, and all of that. And your fate is the result if every single one of those goes wrong. Where your destiny is the best possible outcome given the circumstances of your birth. And it's just kind of an interesting way to look at it and think about where our lives are headed, that every decision, every happenstance that we get to react to is leading us towards one of those two ends of the spectrum. And of course, we'll land ultimately in between.
Yeah, it's kind of up to us,
Yeah, that cutting for sign idea is making the choices towards your destiny rather than suffering your fate.
Yeah, sure, trying as hard as we can.
Well, and it's you can have success there. Little successes can equal bigger successes, and you get positive feedback loops. You get compounding effects, and I know this is a privilege, to live that type of life. This is a privileged idea, or at least it's become a privileged idea, because so many people in the world do suffer in ways that, this is not a priority. We understand that, but boy, if you that idea of nudging the nose of the airplane 1 degree and then 10, don't end up in a very different place in 10 minutes, but in 10 years you're totally different life,
Yeah.
And I don't know about you, Ron, but I've experienced quite a bit of that now that we're not just 2 years into cutting for sign, but we're 10, 15 years into let's be better.
Mm-hmm.
It's like, yeah, I'm a lot better. That destiny is becoming a now.
Yeah. Are you guys fans of the TV show? What the fuck's that TV show called? The soccer show on Apple TV.
Ted Lasso.
Ted Lasso.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Ted Lasso. Yeah. You guys fans? You guys watch it?
Oh,
I am. You
it's
turned
such
me
a
on
nice show.
It's
so
such
nice.
a good show. I was thinking about that today because it's those characters, the writing is so good. What they want never it's like it doesn't happen the way they want it to, but that's life. And also there are still sweetness and nice things that happen. I think that feels hopeful and a bit more realistic than I get. I get really grandiose ideas of how I want my life to be, and then fight terrible disappointment when it's not like that. And I'm learning to be right sized. It's taken me a long time to be right sized about what I think life should be like. And now I think would say a big part of that has been these conversations Daniel and I've been having for the last couple of years, and getting enough variety in the way people live and perspective to realize one can have a really full, good, rewarding life in a different way than having a lot of money or having the perfect relationship or whatever it might be, whatever one holds as the the crown of their life, their projected life.
Yeah.
I think that's been a gift of this experience, big time.
Absolutely. One of the most important, it was a half a decision, half just kind of fell into there. With freelance writing at the speed at which I work, I was able to pay my bills working between 15 and 20 hours a week. Yeah. And the ability that afforded to coach my one son's wrestling team and my other son's chess team, to never miss a soccer game or a school play, that was transformative, and realizing that we certainly had enough money. But, we weren't buying Lamborghinis and Ferraris and traveling to Milan every year. But we were able to do the things we wanted to do and have the things we needed to have, and also have that abundant time that so many people miss out on during their 30s and 40s and 50s, which is when their kids are, let's be honest, the most fun to hang out with.
Well, that kind of relates to what you were saying. You were wanting to, one of the topics we could talk about is like care around the self, and how when that self-care becomes selfish. And I mean, that I know this is your podcast, but I have a question for you around that personally.
Absolutely.
You literally, Jason, have been one of the people when I talk about people, I talk about you to people, I'd say this person's house is a safe space for me. It's always welcomed. It's like ranch style, wide open. There's people there that are in unconventional roles. Like, I was adopted, so you have an adoptive son, correct?
Yes.
Yeah, and there's multiple generations in the house, not just two, and there's always a sense of warmth and welcomeness and safety. And what I thought was being sacrificed to create all that would be your own self-care. So I've always been curious about how you walk that line.
Well, that's been a bit of a journey. I think that's a great place to start. That one of the big parenting misconceptions I had going in was I used to think, and I would say this in so many words to my wife, and my wife actually came after I had my kids. She's the best stepmom that ever stepmommed. But that she was one of the people who was instrumental in teaching me the difference.
The step up mom.
Yes, the step up mom, exactly. But I would say it in so many words. Once you become a parent, you don't have needs. You have a list of shit you hope happens. And that your job is to subvert all of those to make sure your kids get everything they want. And from those years that I did that, I exhausted myself. I put on 20 pounds that I didn't want. My youngest kid reached 7, 8, 9 in that kind of younger kid zone where they don't know how to do a lot of stuff because you've been doing it for them the whole time. And although I've been very happy in my life for the most part, there was a degree of stress and resentment. And then through the help of my wife and some other models, including the two of you, and realizing, the old metaphor people use a lot about when the face mask comes down to the airplane, you got to put it on yourself first. Otherwise, you will not remain conscious long enough to put one on your kid. And starting to take the time to work out more, to dive back into martial arts seriously. I've always done it. It's been part of my life for a very long time, but not to a couple of hours a week of dedicated time level since I had kids. And just to take that time and permit myself to grow as a person, to create, to become my destiny, to work on the things that I know need to get better or the things that I hope get better, and giving myself the permission to do that. And of course, I'm a better parent and a better host and a better husband for having taken that time. I don't know if that answers the question, but that's the answer I've got.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I'm just curious, where did you stumble on that? Like, how did that, you know what I mean?
A large part of it was just my wife, who wasn't having it.
Oh.
Like, no, that's a ridiculous way to look at parenting.
Was it more like get your shit together?
It was a lot of that. She was already wired that way, where she's like, Jason, if we don't have a date night, our relationship is going to deteriorate, and we're going to show the kids the wrong way to have a relationship with your spouse.
That's solid.
If they don't see you going out to BJJ or Kempo class, they're not going to grow up knowing that you take time for the things that grow you. And then just this last year, I had a very interesting realization. Actually, it crystallized in the car this morning with my wife. I realized that this year was the first year in my adult life I haven't had a little bit of a kerfluffle with seasonal affective disorder in November. And as I don't have bad depression or anything like that, it doesn't need to be medicated. What happens is I have like 2 days where I just watch Netflix instead of work, and I'm sighing all the time. And then some part of me goes, oh, hey, wait a minute, dude, more vitamin D, take a walk. And then I'm back on track. And that'll happen 2 or 3 times in the early winter as the light changes. I think I told Daniel I started training for a marathon in late October.
Come on now. Good job, man.
Yeah, we'll see about that. I got bullied into it by a friend of mine. But
yeah, it's my condolences. Like it's congratulations.
How long are you giving yourself to train?
April is the date of the marathon.
That's coming.
Saturday is the half marathon I'm doing, is both a dry run and a rip cord. So if I come out of that injured, I'm going to go ahead and say, okay, that's enough.
When did you start training?
October,
and it's in April, October. Yeah. So like 5 months?
Yeah, 5-6 months. Yeah.
Be careful, man.
Yeah.
Yeah, I am being very careful. Yeah. I've got a good program, and I'm pretty happy with it. But the point being that this year was the first year of my adult life I did not have the seasonal affective disorder. And I think just getting that much regular exercise in the outdoors and taking that extra hour to 2 hours every other day was
that's so funny. It's
key to that.
How many things in the world exist like quote seasonal depression disorder actually are not getting outside enough, your blood pumping really fast disorder,
Yeah.
Yeah, it's funny. We I don't know what point in human history, probably the Industrial Revolution, that we have to like make up ways to do things with our bodies that was natural and inherent and innate for us.
Yeah.
For thousands and thousands of years. And I was watching someone run down the street the other day. And I was like, used to we were running to catch something to eat or running away from something. And now we're like, I'm going to just do this because my brain needs it.
Well, it all has to do with eating, right? Before we ran so that we could eat, or we ran so that we were not eaten. And now we run because of how much we eat.
Yeah. Or to be able to eat more.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
But those are some examples from my life. And I know that your podcast is about finding those things to do, finding those forms of self-care, self-growth. And also how are some of the ways they just worked out for you guys to fulfill your other responsibilities while also taking the time and mental energy to grow?
Yeah, go ahead, Ron.
Yeah, man. Well, first of all, as Daniel's friend and witness of his life for the last year, I think you and I've done it really well this last year. Like we've really stepped into routines in our life that have helped us be happy with who we are and what we're doing and the path we're on, and grow in a lot of big ways. And there's all, personally speaking, there's all the non-negotiables, like exercise, right? That's like, I didn't get really serious about that until 2018. And that came from being overweight. It came from dealing with some depression, anxiety, and newly diagnosed ADD at the time. And my doctor being like, well, diet and exercise, get get active and eat right. And I was like, what a novel idea.
Yeah.
And I also want to say one thing she also told me was, she goes, who are you friends with that when you hang out with them, you feel better? And the first name that came to my mind was Daniel. And she goes, hang out with him more. And I was like, oh, okay.
That was a couple of years ago, Jason. He also had them ask the same question like a couple weeks ago, and I was like number 4 on the list. And they go, you should hang out with Daniel less. It goes around, comes around,
You should definitely not talk to that guy anymore.
Yeah. I wanted to real quick circle back to one of the things you said just a second ago, and then I want to hear the rest of this. But exercise is not negotiable. Yeah. Now, there are people who are injured, people who are overweight, people who are suffering from chronic illness, people who are depressed. But if exercise is just walking to the mailbox and back this week and then doing it twice next week, that's still exercise and full
Big
points.
Yeah.
It is probably harder for some people to walk around the block mentally, physically, what have you, than it is for me to do my marathon training, because I've been a jock my whole life.
Yeah.
And no, one of the traps I think a lot of people fall into through no fault of their own when they start receiving advice like this is the self-excoriation because they're not doing an Ironman triathlon, or that they've been sitting on the couch watching Netflix for the last year. It doesn't matter what you were doing last week. Doesn't matter what, just do better, do more than yesterday, and you're on the right path.
Yeah. Yeah. That's solid.
Did you use a really big word there? What was it? Self-excoriation?
Excoriate?
Self-excoriate.
Just
beating up on yourself?
Just beating yourself up. Beating yourself up. Flagellation. Torturing yourself and punishing yourself. For not being the thing that you think you should be. And I think that gets in a lot of people's ways, especially if it's compounded with chronic illness, physical disability, or mental illness.
It's like one of our upcoming guests on Cutting for Sun, Stephen Pressfield. He wrote The War of Art, and he talks about resistance. And you can put what you just said in terms of resistance too. And sometimes that can be the most difficult thing. You're kind of hitting on it. Like it can be more difficult for some people to get up and go around the block than it can for you, than it is for you to go do your marathon training. Well, one of the reasons that it can be more difficult is because of this idea of resistance, that the thing that keeps us from doing the thing or things that we need to do for ourselves in one particular area or in our life wholly. I've noticed once I started to recognize this term resistance and how it was playing a role in my life, that it doesn't just come up with art, which is the realm that Stephen Pressfield talks about. It comes up in all of these other things I need to do for myself. So I often ask myself, if you suddenly gave somebody who has very little time, money, and energy, like let's say kids, have they have a job that takes up a lot of time, you suddenly gave them all the time, would they do like maybe they would think they would, everything that they need to do for themselves? And my answer, I would think, would be probably not to as much an extent as they think that they would. One of the most difficult things is getting through that resistance and to do the things that we need to do for ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the best pieces of advice on goal setting I ever received, and I went to the guy later and said, hey, can I just use this all the time? And he did not even remember saying it. He was just riffing. was that most people set their short-term goals too high and their long-term goals too low.
Huh.
Yeah.
And, we're recording this in early January. So it's the classic New Year's resolution about getting back into shape. I'm going to be in the gym every day for 2 hours. I'm going to take like one day off. I'm going to diet like a fiend, and I'm going to have right. And that's sustainable for like 3 weeks. And then life intercedes, because that's not a reasonable amount of time to put into that in most people's lives. And then they fail at that goal long term. There's, 6 months later, they're back to where they were on December 30th. And the thing is that because that is the experience so many of us have with goal setting, we don't believe in the ability to do just a little bit, 30 minutes of practice on a musical instrument every day for a year, or every weekday for a year. You'll be able to go onto a street corner or a subway station and make a few bucks.
It could be 10 minutes.
Right.
What you said to just now is so near and dear to my heart. That's that 1 degree, just do 1 degree, the nose of the ship, and make those. But what makes that 1 degree matter is that it's for a year, 5 years, 10 years. But that's why, like, I personally, Ron loves this part of my life. He's very encouraging about it, is I have an integration list that I redo every month. And it's 25 things that and you could just pick 5, whatever. It's 25 things that I'm integrating actively into my life. They can be small or big. And I rewrite that list every month. And if something's integrated into my life via that list, it doesn't go on the list the next month. But what that creates is it creates the feeling of a new year every month. And so that thing lasts about 3 weeks. Well, good. Do it every 3 weeks then. Restart every month. These are little tricks and hacks that work incredibly.
And that was for about 10 years. I did something that I called them. I'm forgetting what I called them, but every other month, like, so on odd numbered months, I would do something every day. Whether that was clean my desk at the end of the work shift, or take my wife for a walk or something. Just for 1 month, I'd do that thing every day. And then by the end of the month, I'd have an idea about whether this was a net positive for my life or a net negative for my life, and that it would have become a habit. And then on the even number months, I cut something out of my life for the month. Like, I'd quit drinking, or I'd stop doing refined sugars, or, 1 year it was no video games by myself, or so for 1 month, right? Where if I was going to play video games, because I got a little bit of screen addiction now and again, I would have to do it with somebody, whether I'm on the Xbox with my kid or playing Axis and Allies online with my dad. But things like that. So it's the same kind of thing that you're talking about, where you're experimenting and playing with and working with, integrating and removing things from your life to sit and, keeping what sticks.
Gamifying things, listify things, making words, like, just throw everything at it. Get good things in your life, and things that aren't so good out, and it fucking works.
Now, Ron, you do some of this professionally as a coach.
Yeah.
And I imagine that the biggest pushback you get from parents is, where am I going to find the time?
Yep.
And I suspect you have answers.
Something's got to die.
Something's got to kill your kids.
Jesus, Daniel. I mean,
so that's the exact.
You know what's really interesting?
What this show is about, Daniel. The exact opposite.
Sorry, I zoned out for a second.
I've got one thing that's in common with all my clients.
I don't have any kids? No, I'm sorry.
That you know of.
Yeah, that 23andMe is going to bring some nice surprises for you.
I'd find them, and they would be. I'd take them.
Yeah.
All my clients are men who are pretty high achieving. They're professionals. They've got careers. Some have families. Some don't. Most of them have families, and there is a real distinction. You can see it over time. And I was just telling Daniel earlier that we just kind of did a year-end review for some of my guys, and there is this like marked physical difference between the men who sacrificed the time, right? They knew they had to take care of their bodies, so they got into a physical routine, taking martial arts lessons, in some cases doing their ice baths, just all those kind of like more extreme kind of stuff. And then also making the time for their family, date nights, regular date nights, regular kid nights or kid time. And then the guys who their brain can't make that leap of something needs to die. I've got to quit something else, like you were describing. I've got to put something else down, because we often are faked out by this idea that something is urgent and it needs to be taken care of now. And when we do that, we sacrifice, like you were referencing, the bigger long-term goals. My coach, a guy named George Cow, calls it not urgent but very important category of our life.
Yeah.
And
that's classic Stephen Covey, Quadrant 2, right?
That's the guy who did Get Things Done, right?
Now that's a David Allen. That's the 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
Oh, okay.
That's his opening about the chi-square, about urgent versus important.
Yeah,
We do the
right.
urgent important shit, and we do the urgent not important stuff, but we let slide the stuff that's important but not urgent.
Yes, and if you have a brain that thrives off of urgency and the journalization of leaving things to the last minute and all that, which I think is its own addiction, it can be really hard to turn that corner. But looking at the guys, the evidence of their lives, man, it's a crazy difference over a number of months, 3, 6, 9, 12 months of what your life can look like when you make those like small painful choices, go through the resistance. I want to shout out to one guy. I can't say his name, but he lives in the Midwest, and when he came to me, he couldn't make it through our initial conversation without some serious fears in his eyes and some tears. And now look at his life, where he was in the driver's seat. He made the choices. He asked me the same question you asked me. So you're going to do this, this, and this, and he fucking did them. And his life is so different. I'm like, man, this is you. You've done this. Look at your relationship. Look at your job. Look at your health. And it's when you're in the water changing the temperature, it's hard to tell. But he's like, man, you're right. This is a very different experience now. So the thing is we can hear it. It's harder to make the daily choice for sure. I know that pain myself deeply. I know that pain of knowing the choice and not making the choice. There is a part of our brain that needs to be shown that we can keep a promise to ourselves. And I think Daniel's method of using what he calls his crush it list is a really good way of showing the things that one needs to get done in their life, and then to keep a promise and then to do it. And I've done that personally with my health and losing weight, and I'm doing it now in some different ways that I put off in the past. And every time it's a new season of keeping a promise to myself or fulfilling a promise, something's got to give. Something's got to give. You can't have it all at one time, and their sacrifices must be made.
There's can't remember who told me this, but another thing that stuck, and it's been years since I heard it, that when you say I don't have time for blank, what you're actually saying is I am prioritizing other things above blank.
Yeah.
And if those things are time with your kids, the minimum number of hours in your job to make sure everybody eats food and sleeps indoors, time with your wife, time with your kids, that's one thing. But if it's a second hour on Netflix or a commitment to the local church or PTA that you hate doing anyway, or even something, keeping your house clean to this level where this level would just be fine, whatever those things are, and finding that one piece that you can let go and fill with this stuff that grows you.
Yeah, and there's a lot there too, because you're talking about, well, that second hour on Netflix or something like that. And I think one thing that people will do is they'll automatically, I've done this, label something in their life as unimportant, and I can cut that. But it's actually a cloaked or misrepresented self-care. Like, for example, that second hour or even that first hour of Netflix, that might be something that either doesn't need to be cut, needs to be honored, it needs to be there, but with boundaries, you know, or if that isn't really doing its job. Like I noticed Ron and I were talking about this recently when we'll scroll, you know, and I don't think scrolling for me, it's not doom scrolling. I don't really understand what that even means. Like scrolling, I have good stuff in my feed. It's beautiful or it's funny or it's wise, you know?
But 2 hours later, you're wondering what happened.
Fucking
Right?
anything after about 30 minutes starts, I can literally feel my energy start to be sapped. It's no longer giving. And so getting sensitive to when food or what you're intaking in visually or people or your environment is taking your energy or giving it. And if it's taking and it doesn't have to, figure out a way where that can be now giving or at least not take so much
And there's another thing about the first taste of any dessert is the best tasting bite of that dessert, right? Like your second bite of ice cream doesn't taste as good as that first bite of ice cream. And so at some point, often there's this thing that we like, that we do enjoy doing, but like you're saying, there's a point of diminishing returns that if we cut it off there, we can still have our bite of ice cream and still lose weight.
If you can become a master or just even decent at boundary setting and transitioning between one thing and another thing, that is to say, like detaching from this state of mind and attaching there, then that's when things start to snowball. I've noticed that's when now you can get that 10 minutes or that half hour in of practicing an instrument, and it doesn't take so much energy because you have to like get this whole, you know, your whole mind to go do this. If that thing can flow and you can be more mercurial. I had this roommate one time who was so fucking good at just doing the next thing. And it was like nothing. It was like the difference between him like having another cup of coffee and kicking back in the morning and riding his bike across Portland in the rain was nothing. And I was like, I'd watch him. I was just like, wow, you know, you have so much power.
Yeah, the shift. Who did we talk about that with, Daniel? We talked about that with someone on our show. The difficulty switching. Oh, it was Gay Hendricks. It was Gay Hendricks talking about the difficulty of switching from one task to the other.
Really?
Because of our anticipation of the difficulty, the anticipation of like the energy needed at the front end of that, the perceived energy that it would take to switch tasks.
And also, like Stephen Pressfield says, one of the reasons there is resistance is because when you do the thing that you need to do as opposed to the thing that you're used to doing, part of your ego is essentially dying, and it does not want to die. It doesn't want to change.
Well, any change that we
Fucking
make, any
ego.
step we make towards change is admitting we were doing something wrong.
That too, right?
Yeah, and
that
is hard.
Well said.
You're like fucked psychologically in like 5 different ways every time we want to just do something good. I get frustrated. It's hard. It can be hard to change. It can be.
It's very hard to change.
I really liked a point that Ron made earlier about these promises we make ourselves and keeping those promises and honoring those promises.
Yeah, make your words mean something.
That, you know, think about the people that we love the most, you know, our kids, our spouses, our best friends. And think about if you made them a promise, like legit a promise. Okay. What would stop you from fulfilling that promise? Outside of, you know, physical impossibility and actual physical death. Now, why are we not honoring the promises we make ourselves with that degree of commitment? And why are we modeling to our kids that it's okay to break the promises we make to ourselves?
There's another facet to look at that relationship with ourselves, which is the way that we speak to ourselves internally, the way that we judge ourselves and guide ourselves. I used to really struggle with having a very critical, aggressive, and mental violence towards myself, judgment. And it took me a long time to get control over that and to notice how ineffective it was at actually living the life I wanted. And
that internal self-talk's a mother.
It was brutal. It was super brutal. And at some point I was like, what if someone heard me speaking to my own kid that way? Or if I heard someone speaking to my kid that way? And this kind of paternal part of me is like, whoa. And I've heard Daniel mention this a lot, like parenting ourselves the way we've have been parented all along.
Oof.
Yeah.
I'm gonna write that down.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah, that's
Had a
sorry.
go ahead.
No,
Go ahead.
you're right. You're right.
Yeah. Had a reminder of that from my boy just a little while ago, my youngest. I will often, and I am joking, if I do something stupid, right? Some stupid mistake, I'll just say out loud, Jason, you fool. And he's 12 years old. Don't talk to yourself that way. Why are you saying that about yourself? That's mean.
Yeah. I love it. I love it. It was last year. I was standing right here. This is the entryway of my apartment, and this is also my desk, my office. And my family collects here before we head out. And my son and my daughter and I were about to go have dinner for my birthday. My wife was out of town. Both of them looked at me and genuinely looked at me in the eye, and they go, "Dad, you're a really good dad."
Aw.
And I think they had said that several times before, and I just like brushed it off. Didn't really hear it and listen to it. And I had this moment where I thought, what if I allow myself to believe it for a moment? And it stopped me, and I was like, oh, they feel safe. They feel like I'm there for them, and they feel that whatever they want, I need a dad to be, I'm that for them. And I go back to that pretty frequently. And I think the other part of that is I go, if I can do that for them, I can do that for me. And that's, man, I fucking need that. I need that a lot to be a good dad and a good mom for myself. Not to say my parents didn't love me, right? I think they genuinely did. They're just wrestling with their own shit.
I just had this imagination where in one of the alternate, universes, you asked yourself, what if I just allowed myself to believe that for a second, and then like you just didn't, and then you just instead just yelled at your kids.
What the hell are you talking about? I'm a terrible dad.
What are you being a smart ass right now?
Yeah,
you wipe that sass off your face.
Oof. Well, guys, we've been at it for pushing an hour, so I want to make sure that everybody says everything that came to the conversation wanted to say. Kind of to recap, I think, taking time for ourselves to grow as humans, to become the people we want to be, to live the life we want to be, is not only justified, it's not an act of selfishness. It's a prerequisite for being the best parent we can be. Not just because it creates a life for our kids that's better, but our kids see us do it. We should live and lead by example, and that it doesn't matter what's going on now, just doing a little better. If there's reality is real, because that's how eloquent I am. I are a public speaker and writer. Reality is real. But if there's an injury, there's a chronic illness, there's financial realities, there's realities with a spouse or an ex-spouse that make it harder. And I think don't look at the person who's living the dream, but look at what will make your life a little bit better 3 weeks from now.
Yeah, and just thinking on that tip, like the one thing that I just like to add to that, Jason, because this is the linchpin of all of this for me, was long-term orientation and 2 steps forward, 1 step back mentality. Because what I would do before is I'd be taking that 1 step back, and it seems like your whole world in that moment, and you're like, I'm going backwards, and then you either just say fuck it, or you burn it all down and just start sprinting backwards. And this idea of this being methodical and that change happens, real change, like I call it like oak tree change, oak change, it's like solid. That stuff happens, because of the wind, it happens because, in spite of other challenges, I just fail a lot, and that you can succeed and fail a lot and still succeed. And that, wrapping my head around that and embodying that, I was like, oh, I got this. Because now when I succeed, when I fail, I go, oh yeah, this is just a dip, and then it'll be an up, or maybe I just need to rest, and this is just it's so once I get into that, but yeah, that's a huge one.
Last thing I want to say is something to that effect, and that was came from a conversation I had with a new client. I've been working with him a few months, who went to go visit his family over the holidays, and something went out of his control, and he recognized it. He was in a I don't want to overstate this word, but in a day of depression where he felt low. He felt like, in a bad mood. He felt like things were not at all the way he wanted. And he had this thought, and I'm so proud of him for thinking this. And this is just him, me sharing a story is, oh, I need to feel this because I know on the other side of feeling this, it's going to get back to normal. And I can make decisions, but I have to allow myself to feel disappointment and resentment and anger, but also just move through those things and allow them not to reestablish my reality. This isn't my reality. This is how I feel now. I think that's what you're kind of saying, Daniel, is like taking a step back does not mean reality's changed. And I think that's fucking powerful to go, okay, I feel bad. I need to go watch some Netflix for 2 hours. And then, you were saying earlier about the sads that you would feel.
Yeah. Falling off the wagon, man. Get back on.
Yeah. Get back on.
Yeah. And that interacts a lot with the patterns that we're trying to break. That, you're going home for the holidays. I would bet any amount of money that some of that depression he was feeling had to do with old patterns and communications and relationships reestablishing themselves in this context where they had been created.
Yeah. There's a cool thing that Ron is always bringing up that I've been putting more attention on, and it's working. And that's that. I guess the definition of karma, we think of karma as like, you gotta like burn your karma off. And we think of that as like bad things and then we gotta pay for them. But I guess karma just means action. And so life is the result of your karma. Your life is the result of your actions. And there's a lot of momentum around a lot of your actions, especially if they've been happening a long time. So take some time to burn some of that off and change new actions. And then they'll have a result down the line. But anyways, I just really appreciate that this conversation and giving us this chance to listen to how you've navigated this a lot. You remember a lot of quotes and a lot of references. It's cool to see you work.
I wish I could remember, the names of people I met 10 minutes ago.
I'm going to raise my hand to that.
It's funny what we store, man. You should see my lyrics versus names of important figures in politics come. But
Daniel gives me shit for not remembering guest names all the time. And then he's like, he sent me this list. He's like, do you know where they're from? And I was able to say
there was like
all but two
on this list.
Yeah, I was embarrassed last night. I took my youngest to parkour here in town, and I live in the town I grew up in. I spent a lot of time elsewhere, but when it was time to raise a family, I hadn't found a better place yet. So I come home and I walk into his parkour school, and this woman says, "Oh my God, it's so good to see you." And like greets me with physical contact. And I have no idea who this human is. None at all. And so after she leaves, and as she leaves, she like touches me again and says, "So good to see you." Yeah. And so I kind of go up to the lady at the counter. I was like, so did you see that? I do not recognize that person. Do you have her name there in the computer? And it turned out to be a girl I went to middle school with.
Wow.
Middle school. And that person could remember my name and face.
That's amazing.
Way beyond my capacities. Doesn't mean that now that I know who it is, it's like now that I put it together. Oh yeah, this person and this class and this team, and she did that nice thing for me that one time in 8th grade, and it all came together. But
so Jason's not a very thoughtful person.
Terrible. Awesome. I'm a sociopath. I'm absolutely sociopath.
I have no feelings.
Nothing on the inside, nothing on the outside. But kind of let's put a little bow on it. That is one of the things, kind of a pet peeve I have about a lot of the communication in the self-help industry and the self-actualization sphere, is a lot of those things that we say to ourselves, those coachy slogans, the stuff from athletics about, one step backward, two forward, and all of that, just get up and do the thing. It's powerful and it's important, but it can also feel a little blamey, especially to people who are stuck in patterns, and actually make it less likely for them to get started. And so I think all of this needs to come from this position of, like you said, Ron, a level of kindness that we show towards our children.
Yeah.
That we should treat each other with the patience and the kindness and the tolerance for failure and the belief that tomorrow's going to be a better day.
I can guarantee, speak for Ron too. All right, I can speak for Ron here.
Do you?
Myself, in that this this adventure where he's really stepped it up the last couple of years, and I've really stepped it up, that has been a kinder year to ourselves. More allowance, more forgiveness, more fun. I mean, I'll have days today, now still, where I'll fall off the wagon and then decide that I'm going to stay off the wagon for the rest of the day and just roll around like a greedy little pig in my house and just indulging. Those fucking days happen too.
Yeah. Well, that's the irony of, doing hard things makes life easier. And it's very difficult to internalize that until you've experienced it. That, what's Jocko Willink's thing about discipline equals freedom, right? Where you have the mental space, the financial space, the time space to take a day and say, this is a bad day. I'm just not going to do anything productive and just treat myself. Yeah. You have all those luxuries in part because of what you invested into your time, energy, and finances over the previous year.
It's right? Like Sadhguru says, he goes, sometimes when you're not doing well, fuck it, go home, give up.
Yeah. Temporarily, and that's okay too.
It's just like, but it doesn't mean that that's always the right thing to say. You got to be a goddamn ninja on this path.
Yeah. Well, gentlemen, before we go, what's the one thing that you wish you'd said that you hadn't yet?
I took the piss out of Ron twice, but I think I only took the piss out of you once, so I've been regretting that.
Oh, that's totally understandable.
I have no regrets. I live a regret-free life.
Yeah, you're also a shitty liar.
Excellent.
I was going to ask you, the one thing that we didn't get to was we wanted to throw scenarios at you for safety, like just like as many off the wall. Okay. Ones. This one is inspired by a Ray Bradbury short story. What would you do if one of your kids disappears? And this is 5-alarm fire. Like they're gone. You put up the posters, the whole thing, and you're like, holy fuck, where's my kid? But then they come back and you're so glad they're back. But then as you're hugging them and you press your head against their chest, you hear a ticking, tick, 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 tick. And you realize your child's a robot. What would you do?
So the flip answer, this is also courtesy of my wife. That kind of situation is exactly how I become Batman. And probably not the good Batman, but like
you're going super villain mode.
Right? Yeah. But kind of advice from the very first instance that your kid, you can't find your damn kid. You're at the fair, you're at the store, and your kid's gone. Immediately drop to one knee, shout their name. Reason being that their ears are down here. And up here, cool. between your mouth and their ears is the central body mass of all the human beings around you. And we lose kids in crowded spaces. And so your kid might not hear your voice because of the acoustics and the physics of that, where you drop to one knee and now all you got is legs on level. Your kid can hear you from 100, 150 further yards away.
And then, okay, so to double up on that, follow that conversation, what do you do if you lose your inner child?
Back to what we're really talking about.
Well, I already answered that question. Sociopathy. Nothing on the inside, nothing on the outside.
Inside Jason's chest is a little like lost foot. It's like a milk carton with his face, his childhood face.
Jason is one of those kids that returned to their parents with a ticking heart.
Yeah. So I've been told. It's good that you're reading Ray Bradbury. He's one of my very favorites.
It's classic stuff, really classic stuff. I wanted to just tell you a quick story of not being prepared as a family when shit hit the fan, and realizing like, oh, we need to be more prepared. Is 2 weeks before Christmas, the fire alarm in our building. We live in a 6-story apartment building, and we used to have a solid like go bag plan on where to meet. Just the whole thing. We used to run our kids through fire drills on like what to do. And we hadn't in a few years. And my go bags like turned into like camping, just like disintegrated into different things. and we were
Your go
asleep.
bag is now a glamping set of huge luggage.
My go bag is just in pieces, like just all over the house.
His go bag is the phone numbers of 3 Sherpas. That's
and the alarm went off, and instead of like doing, going into full mode of like, oh, we got to do something about this, I ran out the hallway like in my underwear, and I was like, God damn it, this better turn off. I need to go back to bed. Like I was just like mad, and I'm watching people leave in their like bathrobes and all that stuff. My kids are kind of panicked. And anyway, we're obviously fine, but they leave and all that stuff. And actually what I was kind of pissed off about was like, oh, our plan that we hadn't been practicing in years, what we used to have, had just like shit the bed. And it really reminded me, my wife and I talked about afterwards of like, there's some just basic safety shit that we need to reiterate and have a plan for. So I thought about you the whole time, like Jason would give me a big fat F today.
A plan we don't rehearse isn't a plan, it's a wish, right? And you guys, there's a thing I'm planning to do this year with a couple safety podcasters, but I'd love to get you guys involved in it. We're going to make a kind of a safety holiday about spring forward and fall back days, where on that day, we're already redoing, reloading and testing our smoke alarms. Also, get in the first aid kit. What needs restocking? Get into your go bag. What ended up in your camping equipment? Reassess the fire plan. Like maybe you wrote the fire plan when the youngest kid was 2 and a parent had to go rescue them, or when the 2 older kids were sharing a room and now they're in different rooms. Maybe you've moved into a house at the 2nd floor and there's no fire ladders yet, right? Yeah. Where on spring forward and fall back day, you take like 2 hours as a holiday tradition and see to those little safety things. And I think that could be very powerful.
Yeah, that's solid. I like it.
It's not as good a story though to bring up on the safest family.
Well, yeah. Remember, bad decisions make good stories.
There you go. Yeah, we're talking. That's for you, Ron.
Solid.
All right, guys. Well, gentlemen, thanks for coming on the show, and thank you everybody for watching. Leave any questions or comments in the comments, and we'll see you all next time. Thanks again, guys.
I appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Take care, man.